Uh, we are past 10 minutes for the next presentation. Again, I apologize for the intruders and scammers. This is a lesson learned not to ever put our Zoom information out there, but we learn, and so welcome back. The next presentation is Tools to Innovate Your Business, and we have three gentlemen going to handle that presentation. So Mark, Carl, and Gary, over to you. And Mark, I know you are leading the pack today.
Good morning, Effia, and good morning to everybody else here too. Thank you all so much for coming out. I think this is a really cool opportunity. I'm going to go ahead and kick things off with a kind of legal spin on tools to innovate your business, something that not everybody thinks about when they're given this great inspiration to go out and provide products, goods, and services for your fellow humans. But it's good that we're talking about it because it's often an area that trips people up and might stalls their success if they're not able to make sure that they check every box when they're getting off the ground. So I'd like to start out with just getting to know the audience a little bit better. Can I ask how many people in this presentation are business owners themselves? Recognize it's hard to do when I can't see everybody's hand raised.
I guess you have to use reactions. Raise your hand if you're a business owner. So we have Gary going out. I myself included. I would say Rachel too. In the room, any business, Leslie, your screen. Any business people in the room? Okay, there's a Baobab entrepreneur joining Rachel. And in the room, I believe, students. Yes.
Okay.
All right, entrepreneurs are here, about 7, 8. Yeah, entrepreneurs are here, business owners, yes, startups, entrepreneurs are here. Hello.
Okay.
Yeah. My name is Joseph.
Well, it's good to meet you. Thank you so much for sharing. Well, so I asked that question because there are some things that you only find out about business ownership after you decide to embark on your own and go out and found your own business. And one of those things is the legal organization of it, which is a great place to start. So let's say that you come up with a great idea and you want to make sure that your business idea is very effective, but also that you're protected. What's one of the first things you can do? And I'm talking about corporate infrastructure. So many years ago, around the time of the American Revolution and shortly thereafter, there weren't any such things as corporations for the most part. The state of New York, I remember, had the most, and it had about 7 total, which is absolutely astounding because today there are millions. So without a corporation for your business, without some kind of entity, whatever happens with your business is analogous to what happens to you. You would have no insulation, no different tax treatment. Everything that happens to your business is the same thing that happens to you as a person. And so one of the things a corporate entity allows us to do is to create an entire separate kind of being that can have its own bank accounts, have its own taxation information, and can be assessed with legal penalties while you, the person who's managing all of it, can tend to get off scot-free. Well, not necessarily scot-free, but you won't have the same liability as you might if you didn't have a corporation. So just to talk a little bit about the different structures that one might employ, you have to first ask yourself, what kind of business do I want to start? And one of the other questions that you might ask after asking what kind of business is, who do I want to start this business with? if you are just trying to work on your own, if say you're a freelance engineer or a freelance architect or a bodyguard, whatever kind of job it could be, you probably want to start a sole proprietorship. And a sole proprietorship is exactly what it sounds like. You're the only person working in the business. You don't have to worry about relying on anybody else for corporate governance. You don't have to ask anybody if you want to sell the business. All the decisions that you make regarding the business are your own. But if you file an entity like a LLC, a limited liability corporation, or any other kind of corporation as a sole proprietor, you will still be offered the same protections that that entity would offer. So what if you want to have multiple partners? Now this is, to just backtrack for 1 second, a sole proprietorship is typically very attractive for a small business, something that you're just going to be operating on your own, never going to be a stock offering. You're never going to try and crowdsource hundreds of millions of dollars to do business on an international or global scale. So that's a little bit more of what we see commonly with small businesses. For a mid-sized business, say you want to have a couple of partners, maybe you want to start a law firm or a consulting firm or a real estate investment group, then you might want to have something that's more along the lines of a general partnership or a limited liability corporation. And that's a kind of structure where multiple people have an interest in this same one entity that simultaneously protects all of them. So what you might decide to do, you get all of your buddies that you want to work together with. All of you will sign an agreement that says you have an interest in this entity, and these are your rights and these are your duties. So the rights are the entitlements that you have to certain protections and certain involvements, and the duties are what you promise to the company and thereby to the other members of the board. And this is typically more suited for a mid-sized business doing most of their work, most of their revenue in a given region, but where you might have multiple sectors, you might have different jobs. Like in the context of a law firm, you might have one lawyer who's a very, very good trial lawyer, but very bad at business and client development. And so you want a different lawyer to be handling those aspects of the practice. Then if you're doing a trade type organization or a retail organization, you might have somebody who's a very creative designer, makes the best products, people love them, but doesn't necessarily know accounting and mathematics. And so you'd want a partner that can do that. You all can work together at that point, find the corporate structure that works best for you. It's typically a general partnership or limited liability company. I want to talk very briefly about the difference between those two things. A general partnership with somebody, or just about any partnership, means that everybody shares everything equally within the company. So the company's profits and the company's debts and the company's liabilities are all everybody's equal responsibility. With a limited liability company, you can change that. You can have somebody be responsible for 20% of the liabilities, somebody else responsible for 80%. You can pick and choose which thing somebody's responsible for. You can have somebody be responsible for all of the credit card debt. You can have somebody be responsible for the mortgage if you choose to buy property. So it's a little bit more of a flexible structure if you're trying to tailor things specifically to people's individual contributions and needs. So I wanted to just pause very briefly and ask if there are any questions. I know there's sometimes a lot of information, so I want to make sure that people are following along and have an opportunity to ask.
I have a question. What
Please.
if hi, what if you are married and you start your business while you're married? I know that, you know, in the States with some of the property that you purchase after you're married, that becomes joint properties. Is that the same with businesses?
So the short answer to your question is it depends where you are in the United States. Different states treat that a little bit differently. The longer answer is yes and no. So a lot of times you will see people start a business together or start a business and then get married. And if you have a business with multiple partners, that business might have a provision that says nobody else can inherit control or can inherit a portion of the business just by virtue of marriage. So in that situation, you might have a spouse that's entitled to receive profits or to receive an interest monetarily in that, but they'll never be able to exert control over the business. So the precise situation that you see all the time is a group of people get together in a partnership or they form a legal entity like an LLC or a corporation, and then they keep it for many years, and then one of the partners passes away. So then that partner's spouse will inherit their share of the business. But the business says, look, we have our own thing. We know how we're doing. We entered into a partnership with this one person. We don't want that share to be alienable. So how do we go about this? Well, that person's monetary entitlement to the share is intact, but their right to participate in meetings, their control, typically does not pass unless you have a provision that says that it does, or you're in a region where by statute they have an entitlement to participate in control decisions. So what typically you see in that situation is the business will then buy out the person's spouse. They'll offer them a fair market assessment of that partner's equity, being like the money that they have that corresponds with their share in the firm, to that spouse, and say you divest your shares and your interest in the company in exchange for this sum, and then everybody goes on their way. If it's somebody who's friendly to the company that they've known for many years, then they might say, look, I have this entitlement, but I'm not going to do anything with it. Just keep operating so that you don't have to take money out to pay me. And then I'll just include that in my estate and pass it on to my children or something like that. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, yes, it does. And I'm glad that you answered I'm glad that you brought up the point about passing it on to your children. So yeah, I was going to ask that question as well. What if you do have children and no spouse? What then happens to your portion of that company? So thank you for that.
Yes, of course. And just to provide one last for the point of clarification on that. That's one of the many things you can do with a corporate entity, which is why it's really important to consider having one of these to run your business. Because if you don't have a corporate entity, then everything automatically transfers to your spouse upon your death. And if there is no spouse, it automatically transfers to your children. And that includes liabilities and debts. So if you've opened a business just in your own name and you took out a personal $500,000 loan because you're the greatest coder who ever lived, and you're going to turn that $500,000 of investment into $5 billion, and then you get struck by lightning, you now have a business that's useless because that amazing coding ability was a unique skill that you possessed. So the business isn't worth anything without you. And then that loan that you took out now is the responsibility of your family. It doesn't get divested just because you got struck by lightning. That becomes the responsibility of your husband, your wife, or your children. And that can be quite burdensome. Whereas if you have an LLC or sole proprietorship or any type of corporate entity, then, oh, well, too bad for the bank. They can seek recourse against the business, but they can't attack your family. So that's one of the reasons why it's really important to at least consider using a corporate entity, because then liability can't transfer too. So that's also a pretty important thing for us to talk about. Let's talk a little bit more about liability. So as a general matter, I'm sure everybody here is at least somewhat familiar with it. Liability is essentially a summation of the risks that accumulate and are semi-quantifiable that you have as a business or as a person. And the corporate entities that we've been talking about help insulate you from that by providing a buffer between you and the business. But is that always worth it? And so this is another question that we ask when we're working on a business is, what are my risks? And that can be a lot of different things. So I wanted to actually open it up to the floor now and ask people to participate. If you were starting a business, what are some of the things that could put your business at risk? Come on, anybody.
I would go. Going too big too fast.
Absolutely. That is definitely one. That's kind of like what we talked about earlier. That might be trying to reach a massive population. That might be taking on a huge loan because you have a really, really great idea that you want to do. That's certainly one. Going too big, too fast. And like we talked about just a few minutes ago, that's one big way that having a protective entity can help you out. I see a chat that says, not enough money. That's also a good one. This is another way that a corporate entity can help. So one thing that a lot of people might encounter when they're starting out is nobody wants to give you a loan because you're untested and you haven't done this before. So a bank might not offer you great terms necessarily, but you might decide, okay, I want to partner with somebody else who has, and you see this a lot in the business world, a kind of mentor-mentee relationship, young up-and-comer with a great idea, but no credibility, needs help getting the funding. So they go out and they find an old timer, somebody that's been doing business for a little while, a known quantity for banks and for investors. And at that point, they'll say, hey, you, Mr., Mrs. Older player, you have a lot of experience. You're well known. I have this great idea, but nobody will listen to me. Let's work together. And sometimes they do. And at that point, then they have to decide exactly, okay, what's my participation going to be? And how are we going to divide our responsibilities and our profits? And the corporate organization helps you do that by giving people very clear roles and responsibilities at the outset of doing that. So the older person can say, hey, I'm your silent partner. I'm your capital partner. I'm going to co-sign a loan for you and do only that in exchange for 20%. So if that's the case and you sign that loan and then the younger partner turns out to be a scoundrel and then is running a black market forged baseball cards business under the corporate entity, then the police later on come back and they try to attack the older partner, he can say, hey, this was my only involvement. I just gave him some startup money. I didn't have anything to do with this fraudulent baseball card company that he was running under this shell. I can't be held responsible for that. And a lot of times the courts will agree with that. And then let's check the chat. I see Gary has shared not understanding your market. That's definitely a risk to a business. Not sure how the corporate shell might interplay there. I'll let Gary talk more about that when he gets to speak in a few minutes. What's the next one?
Yeah, there was not enough money, no business protocol from Angie. And Akala also had a question, how about going into business with unqualified individuals or uninvested individuals?
Right. And so I think we actually wound up just talking about that by happenstance a second ago, going into business with unqualified individuals or uninvested individuals. That's a big way that having a corporate plan can help, because again, that really specifically outlines what everybody's roles and responsibilities are going to be. So everybody has a clear idea of how the chips are going to fall once they actually start practicing business. So that's a way where it is a really, really important help, actually. What about taxes? Everybody knows about taxes, right? Or at least a little bit. We know that they exist. We know they're unpleasant, and we know that they're an absolutely necessary part of running a business. One of the most important things that you can use a corporate shell for is allocation of taxable income. And so if you're running a business either just by yourself with no insulation, no identity protection, that's okay, but all of the business income is going to be treated as ordinary income. Which in the United States, I don't know about every other country in the world, a lot of times your ordinary individual income is going to be more than you would pay as a corporation. Similarly, you have a lot of latitude to claim write-offs for business expenses. That latitude still exists when you're doing it as a single person. But a lot of times the IRS will scrutinize you a little bit more because people kind of try to get creative with that and say, if you're running a business out of your house, people will try to claim all of their home furniture sometimes as a business expense and then want to pay less taxes because of that. And the IRS will say, I don't know about that. Maybe in your home office, but not that amazing Sealy Stearns and Foster mattress that you decided that you just had to have. So tax liability is a very important part of deciding what kind of corporate structure is right for you. So I realize I'm almost at the end of my time. I wanted to very briefly address how would you go about starting your own corporate entity? And there are essentially two ways at this point in our society's development. You can either call a business lawyer, somebody like myself, maybe somebody else. It's not very difficult if you know what you're doing. Or two, you can file articles of incorporation yourself. And what that process involves is going to the state regulator, whatever government entity in your region manages corporations and keeps a ledger, and filing with them on their papers. They'll have forms for you, a formal request to start a corporation. You'll have to explain what the structure is going to be, who is going to be involved in it, and what the purpose of the business is. And so you tell them that, you give them the forms, and they take a little while, and they will come back to you and say, here's your corporate charter, you're good to go, pay us taxes every year, and don't break any laws, and you're good. Or they'll say, no, that's not okay. So that was the last part of my presentation. Thank you all so much for listening. We want to move on to the next people, so I'm not going to ask for questions right now. If you have any questions, feel free to send me a direct message, or Effia can share my contact information with everybody here. Thank you all so much for participating. And then now let's move on to Carl.
Thank you so much, Mac. I feel like I'm learning so much through these presentations.
Well, it's my pleasure. Glad to be here.
Greetings to everyone around the world. Can everybody see my screen? I'm sharing some slides. Just need one person to confirm, and then we can kick it off.
Carl, yes.
Excellent, excellent. I'm very grateful to be here, and I appreciate Effia extending the invitation. We've collaborated on a number of initiatives as it relates to sharing knowledge, education, and skills on technology, finance, legal, as Mac presented. So very excited to be presenting to everyone today. Coders Who Travel and Team Esteem have partnered over the years. So very, very glad to be talking to everyone today. I know it's been a long day. You've heard a lot, so I'll try to keep things exciting, fun, relevant, share some cutting edge information that I've come across in my time as a consultant at PwC. And so what I do is I consult for some of the largest corporations in the world, help them solve business problems. And you know, ultimately our mission at PwC is to build trust in society, solve important business problems using our human-centered approach and focusing on the latest and greatest technology and tools. So I'll talk about some of the biggest technology trends shaping the world today, and how you can think about innovating them, and being aware of what's going on is really important, so that if you're launching a business, joining a business, or studying, you know about the biggest trend shaping society in the business world at large, so you can make well-informed decisions and move forward in your career. So let's kick things off. Macro tech trends. When I talk about macro, I'm talking about macroeconomic, the biggest trends in the world right now. And to provide context here, it's helpful to look at the big picture, right? So what is happening right now? We have a trend that's very best described by Mark Andreessen, who is a venture capitalist from Silicon Valley, but essentially he told us that software is eating the world. And let me give you all a real life example of what that means. So back in 2008, the largest companies in the world by market cap that everybody knew that were leading the charge in the business world were companies like General Electric, Walmart, AT&T, Procter & Gamble, Coca-Cola. All of these companies, they owned hard assets, right? They owned large factories, they owned a lot of goods, and they provided services all around the world. However, now we're in 2021, and the largest companies in the world are depicted on the screen on this slide. We have Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft. And now the clear distinction between those two sets of companies are that the latter are software companies, right? Everybody in the world is now using Google. Everybody has Apple and Android cell phones, smartphones. Facebook has nearly 3 billion users. The number of people on Facebook is higher than many of the largest countries in the world, their populations combined. And we've seen Amazon's entry into almost every aspect of the business world. So the reason these companies became so successful is that they developed a software product that is easily accessible, it's user-friendly, and it's used by people all around the world. It's easy to access. Many people on the line might now see their grandmothers or grandfathers on Facebook. Think about how it's spread into every corner of society, everyone in the population. So these companies have become so successful because they developed a software product that is used all around the world, and it's very user-friendly. And so why? Why did technology become so prevalent? Why are some of the most successful companies in the world technology companies? And that is because the most valuable asset, right? The most valuable thing to own, the most valuable thing to control in the world, especially when starting a business, is not gold. It's not silver anymore. It's not a hard asset. However, the most valuable thing to have and to own is now, it starts with a D, data. So data is changing everything, right? Data, in simple terms, is simply information that is gathered on humans, on property, on stock prices. Data is changing everything because having ownership or control or launching a product that takes advantage of data enables you to build one of these software platforms that can help you scale your business to the heights that we've seen Google, Facebook, and Amazon scale to. Another interesting observation as it relates to the business world in 2021, some of the largest companies in the world, along with the ones mentioned, own no assets. So think about Uber, one of the largest car sharing, ride hailing technology platforms in the world. Uber owns 0 cars. Rather, they've built a platform that connects people. And how do they do that? They have a lot of data to know where to offer, where to market their services, how to build people together. They use data to build a software platform that enables you to ride find a ride from anywhere in the world, Washington, D.C., to Accra, to Tokyo, to Singapore, anywhere you are in the world. All you need is a smartphone that's tapped into the data network of Uber, and you can order a car. It's quite amazing that the pace of technology has enabled these platform companies to emerge. So if you have ideas for building a business, building one built upon sound data positions you well for success moving forward. In my perspective, I'm working with the largest companies in the world, and what CEOs are telling us is that nearly 70% of them believe technology will disrupt how they do business in the next 5 years. And so if everybody in the business world is thinking about tech, acknowledging that data is quite important, what are these technologies that people can use, right? Like maybe let's drill down a little bit to provide a little more context here. Right now, we're in something called the 4th Industrial Revolution. I'm not going to give a full history lesson, but just briefly, in the early 1800s, we had the steam revolution, right? Some of the first bigger technologies were railroads and other like hard assets that led themselves to when electricity was being generated. We had the 2nd Industrial Revolution. And then in the 1900s, towards the late 1990s, the 3rd Industrial Revolution, because the speed of computing increased. So we had personal computers. But now what's very exciting is that we're in this 4th Industrial Revolution. And this is driven by some of these technologies that I'm going to talk about today. Cloud, automation, artificial intelligence. These are the next greatest frontier that if you're tapping into these technologies, you have a lot of potential to grow to a very successful business or work for a company that uses these technologies to be on the leading edge of the business world. And money talks, right? Where the capital goes, economic activity follows, and societal trends follow as well. So nearly $1 trillion have been invested, and this number will actually exponentially increase, meaning more and more money will get invested into these technologies. So let me introduce these technologies. So at PwC, We worked with some of the world's leading PhD computer scientists, economists, and other business leaders, technology leaders, to figure out which technologies are going to have the biggest impact right on the business world. And so we have the ones that are displayed on the screen right now: artificial intelligence, augmented reality, blockchain, drones, the Internet of Things, robotics, virtual reality, and 3D printing. Now, I'll briefly mention each of these, and then perhaps if we have questions from participants, we can dive more into these areas of interest and see what you all would want to learn more about. So I'll introduce them at the high level, and then we'll see which ones are most interesting to our participants today. So artificial intelligence, it's a term that perhaps you're hearing more and more about. And at its simplest level, artificial intelligence is the ability of computers, basically software programs, to think, sense, feel, and act as humans would. So let me give you guys some examples. So one example of artificial intelligence would be a voice assistant. So Amazon has Alexa, Apple has Siri. You're talking to a computer software and it's responding to you. There's interaction. And the assistant is learning because you're feeding it data and information. So another very good way to classify artificial intelligence would be to think of it as prediction machines. We're feeding the software, the algorithms, data, so that they can make predictions on the future based upon historical data.
Hey, Carl, there's a feedback that you should share the presentation as a slideshow. I don't know why they need that, but if you can share it as a slideshow,
okay,
that's a comment. Okay.
But can people still hear me okay?
Yes.
And can you see the full slide now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah. So the mind is like an algorithm. As you get good feedback, you learn and adjust. So the same. That's actually a good point. So within artificial intelligence, that's the highest branch of how I would describe this predictive computing. And then a subcomponent of that would be something called machine learning. Perhaps some of you have heard the term. So machine learning is leveraging a lot of statistics, computer science, and mathematical concepts. But basically, you're building software algorithms to make predictions. So if you had an ice cream shop and you had 9 months of sales and you wanted to predict the next 3 months, you could look at historical data based upon how your sales were the past 9 and try to predict the next 3. Now that's an interesting example because if you're selling ice cream, you need to factor in seasonality, right? Depending on the weather and other factors, but you can build that into your machine learning model if you have the data, say maybe from ice cream shops from around the world. You could gather them and build that into your artificial intelligence algorithm to predict where you should sell, how many items, and to whom. Augmented reality is an overlay of, call it a virtual component, but you're still in the real world. So an example of augmented reality would be a Pokemon Go game that was developed a couple of years ago, and you had your smartphone and you could see the Pokemon in the real world in front of you, but you're not wearing a virtual reality headset, which is a bit different. And blockchain. So blockchain, the best way to describe it is a decentralized computing, a distributed ledger. So if myself, Afia, Gary, and Mac, we all built the blockchain, we could send each other money, digital money like Bitcoin. We could send each other other digital assets without the need for a centralized party. That's the revolutionary thesis behind the blockchain, is there's no middle person, there's no bank, central intermediary between us exchanging anything of value. And so many technology companies are creating blockchains so that you can send money, digital assets around the world without the need for a bank. And blockchain has a lot of potential to revolutionize how financial services work, lending, sending money, say to Africa, from Africa, so without the need to pay banks high fees for transfers. So there are a lot of emerging startups in the world of blockchain, especially in the Africa, Middle East, Europe region, quite frankly, everywhere in the world. These trends are very global. Drones are essentially flying robots that parse and capture data. Drones are often used by agricultural companies, say to keep an eye on their farm so that they can figure out.
Hey, Carl?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I think the people on the ground, they are watching from a projected screen. And right now, as your current slideshow is showing the notes as well as the slides. And so the slide is looking very small on the projector. So that another presentation mode, maybe.
Okay.
You still have that. Maybe we should just go back to the previous one because that's
Right.
better than, yeah. And maybe maximize it, maximize the presentation if you haven't. Yeah, it's very interesting.
I have a potential solution. Let's see. Let's try now.
Great. I think this works. Nabia, can you confirm?
Yes, this is
Okay.
fine.
Kyle, this is great.
Okay, and how are we doing on timing?
You know, you guys started 10 minutes into, and so if we stop at 8:41, that would be good. So you can go for another 8 minutes.
Okay, and I'll leave room for some questions. I'd like to engage with the audience.
Okay.
Very good, very good. So we talked about drones, right? Next up, we have this thing called the Internet of Things. So what is that? The Internet of Things is connected devices. So everybody is familiar with refrigerators, washing machines, basic household items. Now they're being infused with data and microchips so that you have smart things. So you might have a smart refrigerator that has a chip in it. It's gathering data based upon its contents, and it can alert an owner when it might need to pick up milk or something like that. So the Internet of Things are these connected devices that are sending data to the different platforms that built them. Let's see here, we have robotics. So a lot more companies are investing in automation solutions. Basically, robots are building their goods for them and even delivering their services. So they're an example of a robotics company actually on the campus of George Mason, where Afia was a professor this past year. There was a robot delivering food to students from a company called Starship Technologies, and this was a pretty interesting case of a technology company leveraging robotics. And so robots doesn't only mean physical robots in factories. It actually also means software robots performing tasks that humans were previously performing. And that's called robotic process automation, RPA. And you can build RPA bots or robots to automate what you would be doing. So let's say you wake up every day and you have to send 50 emails to 50 people. You could spend 3 hours doing that, or you could code a software robot using robotic process automation, RPA, and the robot can do it for you in a matter of 10 seconds or 30 minutes. 30 seconds. Any manual task that you'd be doing on your computer, you can code and automate using robotic process automation. Now, the key is it has to be repetitive. You have to be doing the same thing over and over. If you're doing critical thinking and problem solving and there's complex logic involved, RPA might not be the best solution, as you still, robots still have limited capacity, and AI still has limited capacity to handle more creative, complex tasks that aren't repetitive. And that's a common criticism of AI actually in 2021 is it will never have empathy and the ability to feel. And so we need to make sure that when we're building AI algorithms, we're aware of the various biases that can be in the data, because there can be bias in the data that entails that basically makes the AI model act in unethical ways. So that's just another consideration that's talked a lot about in the business world, building ethical AI. Virtual reality is when you put on a full set of virtual reality goggles and you're immersed in a completely new world. And then 3D printing is being used by companies all around the world to print things that previously were unimaginable with traditional printers. So they're even 3D printing body parts for surgery. So if somebody loses a leg, 3D printing could help them, recover movement, say if they've been injured somewhere. So a lot of potential for all of these technologies. And I think I'll pause there and let's see if there are questions, and would love to engage with the audience, talk about anything as it relates to technology and innovation in the business world.
Thank you, Carl. This is a great presentation so far. Yes, let the questions come. If you're shy, you can put your question in the chat, okay? But don't let being shy restrain you from getting insight from Carl.
Hey, good morning, Carl. How you doing?
Hey, good morning.
Great presentation, man. Woo, man, you really packed it in. A lot of good stuff. What's your thoughts on the gig economy and the accessibility in the way that we do business and how business is changing as it relates to the new technologies and platforms you're seeing?
Excellent question and point, Gary. So Gary brought up a term, so the gig economy, which has grown tremendously, especially over the past 18 months with the COVID pandemic. So the gig economy is basically people delivering services to other people through these new platforms like Uber, DoorDash, TaskRabbit, and it's basically exchanging anything of value from one person to another through a technology platform. But the key thing to know about the gig economy is that people who are performing these gig tasks are essentially working for themselves, but they're using these platforms like Uber or DoorDash to make money, but they're not working for Uber or DoorDash. So there's a clear distinction here in that these platform companies, if you want to make quick money, you don't have to go and get employed by Uber. You can just sign up as an Uber driver. So there's tremendous potential to help people gain extra sources of income by tapping into the gig economy. So whether you're a gig economy participant as, say, an Uber driver or a delivery manager, I have family members who have delivered for these services. You can earn an extra $50, $100, $200, even $500 a week partnering with one of these companies. And the great thing is you don't even have to work for them. You can just sign up for the platform and deliver services, and it has so much potential. And you can be a creator in the gig economy. So what you could create YouTube videos and people will pay you for it. So it's very much democratizing, which is essentially just means spreading and empowering people all around the world to make money, leveraging their talents and skills through all of these platforms. So if you're interested in, say, like making food and then selling it, you could Google, food delivery, gig economy, and find a company that does that. If you want to make your own clothing and sell it online, you could Google clothing sales gig economy, and you could find a company that does it. So you should not be limited by anything you want to do or create because there's someone out there who wants to buy it, and you can make money using one of these technology platforms. Or you could start your own platform that empowers people to create and sell gigs to each other.
Awesome. Thanks, Carl.
Yeah, Carl, I think we have one more minute and we will have to transition to Gary.
Okay, any last questions? Anything's on the table.
Exactly.
Anything.
Don't forget, I'm going to be putting all of their emails in the chat so you can follow up with them later on. I met Carl at an event at George Washington University, and he spoke and I spoke, and we realized we had so many things in common, and it's been such a great relationship from that time. And it's through Carl that I met Mac, who presented just before Carl. And so I've had the opportunity of also working with them under their nonprofit called Team Esteem that provides financial literacy to high school students. And Carl, we have high school students seated in the audience. So, you know, FYI, in the future, we might do a financial literacy for them as well. But I just want to thank you so much for this great presentation. And with that, I'll introduce Gary. I met Gary at my current church. One of the elders introduced us. Figured Gary was into entrepreneurship and could teach me some skills as a budding entrepreneur at that time. And it's been a wonderful relationship. And Gary, I'm excited you are here, and the floor is yours. You're on mute, Gary.
First off, this is just very exciting to be a part of this with Coders Who Travel, and to know that we are connected to people all over the world. It just shows what we can do now with technology. Because I don't know how many years ago, Carl, but this was not possible. But now that it is, that we can live stream in this way or fashion. So for those who don't know me, I'm Gary Odom, President and CEO of BG Lionstar, which is a social impact commercial real estate development company. And we specialize in working in underserved communities. We have communities that have been neglected through different, at the time, legislation that empowered some of our underserved communities to go without resources. So we go into the underserved communities, we provide master planning, we address food deserts, technology deserts, medical deserts. And so we're working on building the infrastructure. And through that infrastructure process, we attract those who provide social impact services. And so the idea is that the building is only as good as the programming going inside it. So if we were to use the tech term, we're like more of the infrastructure operating platform, and we source programs like apps, businesses, to be able to meet the end user, which is the community. So definitely glad to be a part of this. Also, I'm an adjunct professor at Georgetown, working with graduate students on their capstone projects that they need to graduate on, and testing their feasibility on that. I also work in an incubator space, business incubator space that is catered towards veterans through a program called Bunker Labs. And so without further ado, let me go ahead and share my screen with you. All right, can everyone see this? Hello,
Yes, Gary, we can see.
Okay, great. So talking with Afia and understanding what would add great value is just understanding some of the initial and basic tools for innovation, but more so catered towards business entrepreneurs. Some folks may be thinking about business, starting a business. Some folks may be further along. Also too, is it Leslie? Is that his class I'm seeing, Afia? Is it Leslie?
Yes, so Leslie is one of the 6 members who travel from Ghana's capital to this remote town called Kukuum in Ahafo region. So
all right, can I get
his
Is it
screen.
possible I get people in Leslie's class to wave their hands so I can see them here from Washington, D.C. area? Can I get them to wave their hands?
Yeah, they're telling them to wave their hands.
All right, that is so awesome, man. You know, anytime, you know, we can connect in understanding what technology can do, it's amazing. So I want to make this fun. I want to make this exciting. If you have questions, definitely let me know. Afia will make sure I'm on track with time, but let's go ahead and get started. So, all right, let me see if it's on the slide stuck. Hold on just a minute. Let me see. There we go. So we're just going to talk a little bit this morning about the do's and don'ts of business. You know, there's good ways to approach businesses, business opportunities, and there's ways that are not good. So this presentation will encourage, will inspire. There may be someone in the crowd who says, I want to start a business, don't know exactly how to approach it. And I can help facilitate through this presentation just some basic concepts around businesses. You know, me being in the business incubator space and working with those who are thinking of starting a business versus those who are further along in business is very important. And so this is the kind of, say, from the things that I'm seeing as someone who's as an instructor, that I can pass along to you and encourage you. If you're not thinking about starting a business, maybe you should, right? And if you should, here's some data or some information, as Carl mentioned, that can help you make an assessment. But if you already have a business, right, then here's some things to be cognizant of or conscious of that can help shape your path forward. So let's get into that. So let's start with the do's, right? So with the do's for this opportunity, it's like, why, right? What is your why for wanting to start a business? Like, what is the key thoughts or a process that would determine, you know, why should you move forward? Why would starting a business be a great opportunity? And let me tell you, starting a business is not easy. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of commitment, and it will challenge you personally, professionally, and moving forward. But when I talk to those who start or are starting a business, thinking about it, and I ask them, I say, why are you starting a business? They just say, to make money. And I'm like, in my professional opinion, that is not the best answer. Money may be a byproduct of your business, but your business should be designed to solve a problem. To say, what problem are you solving with your business? And what is the driver behind that? Maybe you are noticing that let's say your classroom, that there is a certain need for physical resources, let's just say access to laptops. And you're like, well, if we had a vendor or an access to get laptops accessible to our classroom, if there was a business that we had more locally to solve that issue or problem, then we realized that we could create opportunities where everyone can get access, right? That there's a resource that is needed, but is also missing. And so if you can solve that problem with accessibility, then you actually have a business solution that is viable to the need that you are seeing, right? So one is the why. What problem are you solving with your business? The second thing is having a good business plan. You know, if you don't have a plan to succeed, then the adage is, then you plan to fail. Having a good business plan is something that is so fundamental to success that I can't speak to it enough. And business plans, as you can see, if you go online, you can definitely see that there's business templates. But the idea is it walks you through each phase from incorporating, as Max spoke to the process of your mission, your vision, your executive summary that speaks about the framework of your business, then going into your marketing plan, going to the data, strategy, the whole nine. And so having a good business plan is definitely encouraged and is needed. And there are business professionals, I'm pretty sure, in your sphere that you can talk to through each phase of the business so that you can have feel more confident about what you're doing. Third, I have advisory board. You know, there's nothing like having great mentors and great people in your sphere who believe in you, who believe in your business, who believe in your vision and what you want to achieve. And having what we call a brain trust means you've got a list of people who are close to you. Maybe some of them might be your professors. Some of them maybe might be your teachers. Some of the folks that you see who have done well in business are folks that you could talk to and ask for advice and encouragement on what you can do to help grow and strengthen your business as that you've created. Second one is measure your progress. You know, it's interesting when you have folks, people who have a business, understand that there's business objectives or things that they would like to do, but they don't have a timeline. You know, business is so important that, as you know, there's only so many hours of the day. And a business is typically measured by not only the problem it's solved, but the amount of transactions that are reoccurring to say, do you have business sustainability? But when you wake up in the morning, and if you don't have an idea of what do I need to do today to empower and grow my business, that's the problem, right? You have to have measurable and defined goals to measure your progress. So if you're just starting out a business in January, you should have sustainable growth in your business before you get to June. Because those who are working with you, and definitely for yourself, you need to show sustainable progress and showing how you've created traction within your business and being able to set it up, be able to make sure that you incorporate according to the laws within Ghana to structure your business. But then you also need to show exactly how are you able to solve problems or challenges that you're going through. So if you're starting a business in January, by June, you should be able to show at least 4 or 5 goals that you've obtained. And then as you go from June to December, to say, what are the actionable goals that you hope to obtain through that process? Is everybody following along with me so far? Is there any questions? Let me see. It may help if I open up the chat. Okay. So with that being said, another thing is that is so instrumental or key is building strong relationships. Relationships have been more the foundation set of opportunity. You know, your relationships in the sphere or people around you have an opportunity to not only give you feedback about your business, but also may put you in a position where they could be your first customer. They could be the first person that may say, hey, I know someone who's in need of your product or services. And those relationships, especially in the early stages, will help you get going because these are people who believe in you, who believe in your product or service, and are willing to extend an opportunity to you to help you get going. And as me, as I started BG Lion Star, my advisory board was actually my college professors. So I went to school here at Georgetown. And so when I started the business, I asked my professors if they would be on my advisory board. And of course, they were very encouraging and said yes. And so through that process, though, I had the business plan I'd put together. I asked my professors to be on my advisory board. They provide accountability to me to setting goals and objectives because they wanted to make sure that I was showing measurable progress. And they also encouraged me to go to events and to network and to build relationships, like with Afia. Like without Afia and networking to meet with her through a referral, I would not have met her and would not be here today to do this presentation. All right, so the next slide. Now we've covered the do's, which are great. Now let's cover the don'ts. All right, hold on. Let's see. All right, these are the things that I have noticed that have impacted business in the most negative way. And these are the don'ts. These are some of the probably like the 5 like biggest issues that businesses face. First is don't underestimate financial strategy. If you are offering a product or service and you don't understand your market or what you're charging, I've seen situations where folks have looked to sell goods or services, but they didn't have the right price on that good or service, and they weren't able to make any money because they didn't understand having a strong operating budget. They didn't understand exactly what the market is dictating as far as the cost of goods or services. And so what happens is, because they didn't understand some of the financial metrics or strategy, they basically ended up out of business. And so don't underestimate the power of having a strong financial strategy. The second is, do not procrastinate on your goals. Have strong, achievable, actionable goal items. Like, do not procrastinate. You know, some people say, all right, I have goals, but today I'm going to watch TV. Today I'm going to do this or to do that. You know, anything that you can do today for your business, for your goals, do not delay. Because the idea is continue to make progress. And so if you don't have actionable items and you don't have them clearly written out, and you're not constantly speaking with your advisory board to hold you accountable, it'll lead to procrastination. And that procrastination could cost you a business deal or an opportunity because you weren't ready. So success is when opportunity meets preparation. So always prepare and to work on it. Second thing is, I know we talked with Carl about, you know, the new gig economy. Don't wait to establish your brand on social media. Social media, it's been one of the largest conduits of commerce. There are folks who are on social media who may be making t-shirts, who may be creating digital content, who are establishing themselves, maybe in a sense to where they're creating such content. Maybe they don't necessarily have something like a physical good or service, but maybe they're establishing themselves as a subject matter expert. So they're bringing like this intellectual capital. So establish yourself on social media, build your brand. Like you say, where we got Facebook, you've got Google, LinkedIn, Twitter, and a host of different others. So establish yourself on social media, establish your brand, and then knowing that your brand could be a platform to reach the global economy and be able to then create commerce. Fourth thing is don't ignore what's going on in your market. if you're in the t-shirt business and you don't understand that there may be 20 other t-shirt vendors in your market and how they're priced and how they structured their product, and they're charging $5 a t-shirt, and then maybe you're charging $25 a t-shirt, but your t-shirt looks exactly like the one that costs $5, they're probably not going to buy your t-shirt. They're probably just going to buy the one that's $5. So you need to understand your market, right? Kind of what we say, do SWOT analysis, whether it's with like your strengths, weaknesses. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Your strength, weaknesses, opportunities. Yeah, thank you, Afia. Hold on, I might need another cup of coffee. And that is so important. So you definitely want to understand your target market that you're going into. You want to be prepared to compete and provide a quality product or service. And so in my experience, when working in the incubator space, a lot of people really have great ideas. Like they say, hey, I'd really love to start a business in this space. And they believe they have a talent or they have a niche that really makes them more competitive, or makes them, inspires them in a way that they think, hey, I can really do this. But you have to do the research. You have to do the research. You have to collect the data to understand your market size, your demographic, who is a typical customer? Are they 10? Are they 25? Are they 35? Like, what is the demographic of the people who are most likely to buy your product or service? The second piece would then be to say like, well, if you're a consumer, what are their habits? How often? Yes.
Time check.
Okay, thank you. The last is, don't be afraid to ask for referrals. The people who are closest to you, who want to see you grow and succeed, are definitely folks that you want to lean to for referrals. And they believe, they want to see you, and they're most willing to give you an opportunity. And so with the last slide, I'll end with this. It says, remember, networking, more so than anything else, is important to your success. Share your excitement about your business or service or product. So with that, I thank you all for your time. Afia, this is awesome. I can't believe we're, like I said, reaching those across the world for this opportunities. And so Afia, if there's time, I'll ask if there's any questions. If not, I thank everyone for your time and for the opportunity to spend with you.